The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. This is Bryan for Breaking Down Security. This week is part 2 of our discussion. Mr. Betcher and I sat down, had a little heart-to-heart around ye old podcast about incident response, and this is part 2 of our discussion here. We get into it around we start talking about more of the pickerel or piscerel cycle, if you will. Talking about containment in this case. You're going to hear us also talking about business decisions and things that you might not budget for that you probably should be thinking about when you're budgeting for things like incident response, like just testing your incident response. The testing of your backups, for instance, may cost you money. Or what have you. So some great discussion here between myself and Mr. Betcher. Miss Berlin, of course, as we mentioned last week, we recorded this on the 8th of August, so she hadn't come back from DEF CON yet. And technically, when this airs, I will be somewhere in Europe. I do not know my precise itinerary, but hope you're safe and hope you are doing what you can to protect yourself and your loved ones and family from the pandemic. So hope you have a great week, and on to part 2. Right. Yeah, I think there's 2 things there that you have to do. One, you have to prove that the data was exfiltrated, but then you have to prove that there was PHI on that system at all. I mean, you could blow away the system and it doesn't have any PHI on it, but you're shooting yourself in the foot twice there, where it's like you have to prove the breach didn't happen, but also prove that the data wasn't exfilled. So, and I know that those are probably 2 sides of the same coin, but sometimes people aren't exfilling data. They're just wanting to use it to, crypto mine, or they're just wanting to do, straight up ransomware. So there's no exfiltration of the data. And you may be able to go in, like you said, with the imaging and say, show that, well, yeah, there would have been PHI on here, but all they do is RDP to another box that they couldn't get access to anyway because it had 2-factor or whatever. So this was just a dumb machine that we used for Y, and they got access to that. Yeah, so those were good. That was a good couple of thoughts there. Yeah. So that's an interesting question. So that would be part of your playbook, I would imagine, if you had a properly, I would say properly written, but I would say if you had a thorough enough playbook where you would say, okay, one, did the systems infected or systems affected have PHI on them? If yes, go, oh shit, and cause an incident. Do they not have that? Then, okay, sit and watch, or make sure continue monitoring, or whatever. I think that's where the CIS top 20, where you need to know what software is running on the box, you need to know what assets are in your environment, you need to know what's on your IP addresses. I think that's part of where that comes in, because it adds visibility to your environment. So I know that things like CMDB are no longer in vogue, but you need to find some way of monitoring and understanding where and what is on those systems that could be affected. Might also be worth it, in your playbook. Go ahead.
It's important to know where all your important data resides. And number 2 in the CIS is, know what applications and data are on your systems. Mm-hmm. Right? Yep. So pretty important.
Yep. And the funny thing is, I mentioned this is, incident response is about process improvement in the end, the lessons learned, and then you're going back to the preparation. So, understanding how change management works in your organization, not just from, punching tickets or doing changes to firewall rules, but, how did the incident work in terms of communication? Was communication good? Was the right people involved? Did what were the peccadillos that occurred? Is like, well, this happened at midnight on a Saturday. I couldn't get anybody. Where's your phone tree? Well, nobody answered their phones because they were all out enjoying the 4th of July holiday weekend, and I just happened to be low person on the totem pole. You know, the incident process is not going to be, well, identify the problems that are, affected the machines or the systems involved. It's going to be identify processes that didn't work, or identify communication modes that were less effective, or well, we just stood this brand new, system up. We need to, understand what are the indicators there. This is a constant evolving process that needs to be reviewed on a regular basis. And that we go back to part of the preparation is what Miss Berlin does with the InfoSec role play stuff, tabletop exercises, and understanding, okay, we got a brand new mail server, we got a brand new file integrity monitoring service, or we got a brand new MSP involving your MSPs. Obviously, Miss Berlin, she's probably feeling channeled right now, but understanding what the communication is there, because they may be your first line of defense. They may be calling you going, hey, we noticed some interesting activity on a box at 10 o'clock at night, and we know that Bob works on the West Coast, so why was his laptop logging into VPN or whatever at 10 o'clock on a Friday evening. A lot of that is behavioral, right? So you got to know what your people are doing. So yeah, tabletop exercises help, should be including all those people.
Right. And there's also behavioral software you can look into that sort of goes into monitor mode and says, okay, Bob typically logs in Monday to Friday, 8 to 6 or whatever. And then all of a sudden there's something out of the ordinary here.
Right.
Right. And so it alerts people. So that's good stuff, that behavioral type software, if you can afford that. Right.
Right.
If you think it's a good thing. Containment is very important here, I think, because, well, you, again, take a step back, look to see how this systems were compromised, and then see if you can patch while the compromise is still in effect, other systems that you do not believe are affected, and that way the compromise is contained, the breach is contained at that point, and the attackers can't go any further. A lot of software does do, like EDR solutions do containment on certain systems that are compromised. So that could be a form of containment as well.
That's hard.
You define how or what systems are compromised, then you can flip the switch and contain everything at once.
Right. Yeah, that's hard because I don't know how it is at your organization, but a lot of fingers and a lot of pies, and a lot of systems integrate to we're gonna make things a lot easier, and we're gonna integrate X, Y, and Z, and whatever, and part of the having data flow diagrams would be helpful, but most companies, or at least orgs in your own company, don't even understand anything outside of their own little box, which was kind of difficult. So and
containment can be as much as or as little as a firewall rule. That the attackers are coming from these 2 or 3 IPs that you've identified. You've been watching them for a couple hours, and so you may put in that firewall rule and wait and listen, right? Or you may see pings from your systems to those IP addresses, and that those are the ones that they're coming from, but maybe this other system is pinging in the same way, and it has the same artifacts to a different IP. You got to watch for that.
Right.
Because that could be patient 0, right?
Right, right. So we were talking about, containment. So when you say a firewall rule, you're not, so at what point do we move from identification to containment? This is going back to the whole thing. It's like the nuanced approach. It's like, okay, when do we act? Or is it just like, we're just trying to draw the circle closer? If we know that customer networks have access to the crown jewels, can we modify the rules, in the periphery so that we can limit the spread without directly, tipping them off that there's a problem? So if we know that there's, Bob's laptop's been, compromised, and we know that Bob has access to databases. Could we head off, his access to those databases, or would that be too much to tip the people off? Maybe the reason they targeted Bob in the first place because they knew he had access to those databases.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the nuance there? Is it like we could just say, okay, we're going to limit them only to the damage on the file server, or we're gonna, because if you isolate Bob immediately, then they're going to know something's up.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a case by case. I mean, that's why you pay the IR guys the big bucks, right? They have to make these types of decisions, or management, but they have to be well versed in the environment that you're dealing with, and that may require some conversations with IT people who know the environment better than somebody who's going to ultimately make that decisions of containment. Right. But once that decision is made, I mean, it is tough. It is tough on when to do that. And keep in mind, there may be compromised credentials and things like that. So containment could involve not only firewall rules to prevent the network traffic, but also say maybe an admin account was popped, right? So they could potentially get in through a VPN with that admin account. So you have to be careful with that. And typically when we actually say, all right, go, contain this particular incident, we also, anyone's credentials who may have been involved, we may not have evidence that let's say all 10 admins, we may not have evidence that any of them were compromised, but we're going to reset their passwords anyway, right? And they're going to change their passwords, right? So keep that in mind. Just in case we have a case where there's compromised credentials, we're gonna change everybody's creds at that point, right? Once we hit the containment phase.
Speaking of containment, I think so I'm thinking of this like a reverse pen test, but a lot of the things that we had to remember when we were Leviathan was to undo the damage that we had done, for instance, or log the information, or the things that we had done during the pen test. I would imagine during the incident response, if you've changed Bob's password or you've reduced his roles in the organization to reduce the chances of somebody using those credentials to access the file server, or databases, or OAuth tokens, or what have you, you need to remember to unlock those. Or maybe Bob is important enough that maybe it would require some review to see if Bob even needs access to that stuff anymore. But it's important to keep track of those things, not only just the timeline, but actions that you did that you can unscrew things up, or
and it may help Bob that if he gets an email every time he logs into a system, that way he knows when he did something. And it may not be him physically that did something. It may be him, his account hit something and he's like, I didn't do that.
Right.
Maybe Bob's important enough to where you need that type of monitoring just to go to him. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That actually makes sense.
He doesn't want his account popped any more than anyone else does. I mean, he's probably the most, the person who would least like to see his account compromised. So give him that ability.
Yeah. Yeah. I whenever banks have the thing now. It's like, oh, did you make this purchase for $45 to, latex RS? And no, I did not. Click, and it automatically, flags that. And, I don't, depending on the type and size, I'm assuming it does things like freezes your account or denies the claim or denies whatever. There could be something very similar, very almost like a second factor. It's like, hey, did you mean to set up this share in your file system? Yes, I did. Click yes, and have an out of band kind of thing for some of the actions that you're doing. Obviously, some users will find that annoying and wouldn't want that to happen. But I think in terms of security, you could help with the containment of that.
Or I love this one where we noticed that you bought some gas in your hometown and then 1 hour later in Albuquerque, New Mexico, right? Does your car drive 600 miles per hour or? Yeah.
No.
Did you actually make that purchase?
Unless it's on a Falcon Heavy, probably not. Yeah. But yeah. So yeah, that's pretty good. So, I love those kinds of things. That makes it a lot easier to do. The one thing that, we talked about the lessons learned and those things was that incident response testing costs money as well. And I don't know if a lot of companies think about this, but doing things like testing your backups might actually cost you money, especially in a cloud or, there's a global chip shortage going on. Me and Mr. Betcher were talking about that beforehand, that it's hard to get laptops and, certain computers and certain form factors, within a certain couple of weeks. So if you're actually, having an initiation or I'm sorry, an initiative to, test your backups as, per yearly compliance requirements, or, maybe you're having to, recover from a ransomware issue and you still haven't made it to the cloud yet. They cost money. Standing up a new AZ or a new VPC in Amazon is going to cost you additional money. So having an IR budget that makes sense for that, or paying for overtime, or if you're using contractors in certain countries, you have to pay them overtime to fix that issue because of the labor laws in that area. So some of the things you need to think of when you're doing your preparation is incident response doesn't just cost money in the back end, but it also costs money in the preparation phase or when you're testing these controls. So it's just important to make sure that you've got those, that kind of budget to do the testing for that, and that you raise those issues.
A real aversion for testing because it takes time and money, and and you don't see the results of it right away. And people do have an aversion for testing because, look, in my career, I can count 2 data centers and an office where someone tested the power backup system and it didn't work. So the whole data center just loses power. And it was a planned test, and it just became an unplanned outage, just like that. And it just didn't happen once. Okay, we're talking 3 times. Just in my personal, companies that I've worked for, that has happened, and I'm sure it's happened a lot more for other companies too. So all around the place. So people do have an aversion for these kinds of tests.
I also worked at a place that had a data center that had a power outage as well, more than once. And then later found out that the data center was not up to, type, class 3 or class 4 requirements, or, where they were digging and busted a fiber optic cable, maybe somewhat. And, all the fiber was going through one side of the data center and not on opposite sides of the buildings.
Right. Or you had 2 different carriers for your internet, but unfortunately you found out much too late, unfortunately, that the local carrier for the non-local carriers was the same carrier. So when that local carrier that each carrier had contracted independently went down, then both carriers went down.
Yep.
So
It's a sad
there's
day
all
when
these
you're.
little nuances.
Yep. It's a sad day when both of your fiber providers then merge and become the same company, because then it's like, oh crap. So yeah. The reminiscences, Mr. Betcher. Yes, yes, yes. So let me ask you a
These things
question.
happen.
So let's go out to the 10,000 foot level, like, you know, we're managers and shit. Okay. What is the goal of incident response? And maybe this was the first question we should have asked, but you know, I'm a manager at, you know, Humpty Squat Incorporated, and somebody says, hey, we need to work on our incident response program, and they're like, what's the goal of the incident response program? I'm brand new to IT. I have no idea why we would need an incident response program. So in your opinion, Mr. Betcher, what is the goal of an incident response program?
Well, it goes back to CIA, right? You have to keep the business up and running and get it back to up and running as quickly as possible. And you need the confidentiality, integrity, and availability in place as much as possible. And if any one of those three things are impacted, then your incident response plan has to take effect and get it back to normal as soon as possible. That's what incident response is.
So what I'm hearing is that a good incident response program will minimize potential damage, you know, be able to get you back up and running if something goes completely pear-shaped. Now what happens if
and it's not just availability, right? So you're talking availability, and that's what people want to focus on. Oh, we got to get it back up and running. But there's two other things in that triad that you have to be concerned with, right? That could impact the business.
Right.
Sometimes even more than your availability, right?
Right. So the integrity would be not just reputational integrity, but there might be, well, I mean, there's a reputational thing there if you're partnering with businesses or in terms of integrity. But in terms of data, making sure the data is secure and is still there. And then of course confidentiality is protecting that data. Make sure. So what happens when incident response does not align with your business goals, which, having read the goal from Eliyahu and Goldratt, the goal is to make money, so how do you communicate making money in terms of incident response? How does the incident response program, and some of the people out there are probably yelling at me right now, how do you justify the cost of incident response? Because it's historically has been security as a cost center, not a value prop, not a value add to the organization. So having a good IR, having a good security team, how is that how does that help you make money?
Right. It's tough to convince someone that an incident response program is needed because it is a cost, right? And you have to be a good communicator and say, okay, well, we need these stopgaps in place, right? Otherwise, if these things were to happen, and they will, as long as our data is valuable to someone, or our pocketbook is big enough for someone to go after, someone will go after it, and we need to be ready, right? Otherwise, if something happens, and let's just take availability for one. If our data somehow becomes unavailable for whatever reason, for let's say 24 hours, what could that do to our business? Do we have sufficient competitors such that we'll go out of business? Right. I remember I had a friend when I was in college. She worked for garden.com. It was the first website that uh, that I know of that people could go and buy gardening supplies and things like that. Well, along comes Martha Stewart, and she puts in her website, and she's got a name right behind her with
Right.
decades of name recognition, right? But garden.com was the big fish, right? Because they were the first. They had that garden.com website. You just type in garden.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Right.
their database went down over the weekend, unfortunately, and they lost all that market share. They took the
Mm-hmm.
reputation hit, the downtime, lost tons of customers, and they were out of business in 6 months.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty damning. So what you're saying is they didn't have an incident response program, or just it was not heard of to have one at that time.
It probably wasn't that in vogue at the time,
Mm.
and you know, it was it was pre, it was right before the big bubble, right?
Mm.
Where if you had a website, you got millions of dollars in funding,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just
Right.
because of the, you know, anybody online would go would just be the new hotness at the time. So
Right.
it was no different. So websites were, little startups were rolling in dough, you know, even though they may not have had a product to sell. You know,
Right.
it was that time everything was brand new, and IT was just blossoming,
Right.
right? So yeah, I don't think our processes in IT were mature at the time. So yeah, things like that, a new startup just wasn't prepared.
Yeah. The one thing I was just thinking about here when you were talking about they didn't have one of those things. If you're a startup, do you have an incident response program before you have a security program, or do you have a security program before you have an incident response program? And or is your incident response and your security programs just, oh yeah, you're the lead developer, oh, and you're also the security guy, or oh yeah,
Yeah.
you're the IR guy, or yeah, oh, we're just going to farm that out to some MSP. I think there's a level of maturity in an organization when somebody, one of the C levels realizes, or maybe they get told by a new partner that, hey, you need to have an incident response program, or we want to see these documents, and oh, well, we don't have those. I think it goes to a sign of maturity. So having these things, if you got a manager asking, why do we need an incident response program, I would say it goes to the maturity of the organization. If you just have it as a, hey, this is yet another hat that our janitor has, for instance, or our sanitation engineer. Sorry, I apologize for all the janitors out there, or the sanitation engineers listening. If incident response or security is treated as a, oh yeah, by the way, instead of a, oh yeah, this is a dedicated position, it goes to the maturity of the organization. If you start partnering with people, or companies, they're going to expect certain level of security or IR that you may not be able to have. I know I've seen a lot of organizations are like, hey, be the first security person in our company, and then you go and look and you're like, wow, they got 300 people. Why am I the first security person? Because yeah, great, you're mature enough, quote unquote, to have a security person, but then now the security person is going to be, oh yeah, you're going to be doing 15 other things as well, because we can't justify your existence there yet. Security in this case will help you make money in terms of partnerships or additional trust in the organizations. The one thing you'll need to remind groups is, yes, you get breached, and you'll put out the right words and everything, and your stock price will rebound 10%, but your reputation will be damaged in the near term if you try to work with partners, or your bigger partners. Let's say you've got a thing going on with Microsoft, and all of a sudden you've been breached, and Microsoft, because of the SolarWinds stuff and all the supply chain issues are now in vogue, you're going to have a very big microscope on your company at that point, and it might actually cost you money in the long run. And we've seen that at when Yahoo and Verizon got together and merged. Yahoo was breached, and that cost what, $300 million or something like that in the asking price. So, I mean, it's going to affect your value in some way, shape, or form there. So, yeah. Did you
Right. If
have
they would
a
have spent half that on a good program and been able to
right,
prevent that outage, right?
right,
So
right,
coulda, woulda,
right.
shoulda. Well, shoulda.
Yep. Yep. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about incident response. The process, the pickerel cycle. I don't want to call it a process. It's actually a cycle because it's one of continual improvement. Incident response is not a one and done. Like Mr. Betcher said, it's a bespoke kind of thing. Everyone will be different depending on the threat vectors. It's the reason why we have folks like Ms. Berlin doing tabletops, for companies to be able to help them understand where they could go wrong. Once you start doing things like threat modeling and understanding how all of your stuff is connected together. Incident response may also help you justify additional kit, or if you've been advocating for simplifying your environment, these incident response tabletops or the preparation in an incident response may show your management, wow, we've got 15 we have 15 different ways an attacker could go from Bob's laptop, and half of them are either corporate network or whatever. Maybe we do need to simplify our landscape and make it a little easier to handle. So tabletops are good for not just showing how you might react to response, but showing how you might affect and make changes simpler in an organization. If you have deficiencies, these tabletops and the preparation can help you have a better and a safe, I wouldn't say a safer, but a better and more manageable incident in the future. Thoughts, Mr. Betcher? Is there anything that I missed there?
Don't be afraid to outsource incident response too. I mean, that's always an option. I would caution everyone to, when you make the decision to do that, to make sure you have the expertise on hand to be able to get a good incident response team partner, right? And make sure that they have what they need to be successful and that what you're getting. Right. I mean, if you're a very small organization and you don't have a CISO, well, maybe you could get a temp CISO hired.
Yep.
That's always an option to help you get the right security, and in this case, IR structure in place, right? If you can't afford to have people on staff, you want to outsource that, you may want to hire a CISO temporarily to help you get that relationship established, get the right processes in place, and get the right partner involved in that. So that's always an option as well.
Yeah. Fractional CISO or virtual CISO is definitely available. I do know a couple of folks that do that on the side, not on the side, but they do it as a legitimate business line. But yeah, and it's obviously very helpful for them because it definitely shows if you don't have the money to have a full-time CISO or a full-time security team. Those are helpful. And if you outsource your IR, you get a fancy note that says the attacks were sophisticated, and then you're safe, right?
Yeah, and then your cyber insurance will kick in. If you don't
all
have
the
that, your cyber insurance may not be affected if you didn't respond to that incident properly. Then your cyber insurance is moot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you need to show some due diligence. Yeah. Or they may deny your claim. They still may deny your claim, but you don't make it easier on them to deny your claim if you actually do have that kind of insurance. Yeah. Cool. All right. I think we're good for now. I'd love to pick Miss Berlin's brain when she gets back, or when we get back from my vacation and our vacation here. Ask her about some of this that we talked about, because I'm sure she has specific ideas about tabletop exercises and how all that went. So You can find Miss Berlin on Twitter at InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR. The incident response detect and defend, D and a D. I'm not gonna, not like the barbarians of the steppes or the clerics of the windmills or whatever it is that they call those them. It's a InfoSec role play, and of course she had a wildly successful workshop at Black Hat and DEF CON and a village at Black Hat and DEF CON, for Hackers Health, which was bringing awareness to mental health issues in the InfoSec community. We'll be talking about that. It'll be a little while, but I definitely want to get a report from her about how well that went in the coming weeks. But you can follow that at Hackers Health on Twitter as well. So, Mr. Betcher, we just talked about incident response and logs and being able to view things and getting visibility into an environment. I wish there was a tool that would help you gain better visibility into your Windows environments. Do you know of anything like that?
Well, I think I do, since you randomly asked. There is a product called LogMD, and we did mention the Shrum database. So LogMD does extract that database and puts it in a fancy table for you, so you can see, how much data came in, how much left, and what processes were responsible for that. So yeah.
Okay.
Check it out at log-md.com.
Cool. Hey, let me ask you a question. Now that Windows 11 is in I would say a public beta for all intents and purposes, have you tested LogMD on Windows 11 to see if there's anything new or anything that needs to be added for that? Because everything I've been reading says October is going to be when they release that, or probably November.
Ooh. No, I don't have an early copy of that, and that's something I might look into.
Yeah, I believe I believe there's a way to pull that down. You can just probably Google "get me some Windows 11," I have a VM on my desktop here that runs in Hyper-V on my Windows 10 box, which is really great. It's still very much beta, but I mean things like logs and stuff I would imagine would be fairly fully functional, or at least production somewhat ready. So
should be backwards compatible. I mean, Windows has been good about that. Up to this point,
for good or ill.
For good or ill, that's true. So we'll have to test it and see.
Cool. Okay. And people can get a hold of you online on Twitter.
Yeah, at Betcherpwned. Okay. My last name and then PWNED.
Very nice. Okay. We BreakSec has a Twitter, BreakSec podcast, BreakSec, BRAKESEC. You can follow me on Twitter, Bryan Brake, BRYAN BRAKE. I'd like to, give a shout out to all of our people on our Slack there. It's a very active Slack. We have, dedicated channels for things like threat hunting. We actually have a log and sim channel dedicated to all things like Graylog or Splunk, or, if you've got issues with your sim, you can go in there and ask questions. Hey, has anybody seen these, this rule set are working? Somebody asked, this was on the 26th of July, but they said any sysmon folks can ping a filtering question off of. I mean, we get all these kinds of questions like this about socks and, knock kind of issues. We have a lot of great people, asking a lot of good questions and adding, things like exempt, and Alex Giles and BW posting up bad links or recipient emails with credential harvesters in them. So Joshua H put up another one a couple days ago. If you are looking for real active threat intel, that's a great channel to be sharing that information in. If you want to be somewhat anonymous, you can definitely do so. So Billy also, he said anyone has intel, it's a legit Amex daemon, Amex domain. So he put a link to that. And so, if you're looking for that, you can send us an invite to our BreakSec Twitter or email us at bds.podcast@gmail.com. August is a huge month for me personally, other than going on vacation. I come back on the 26th from a transatlantic flight. And then the next day is InfoSec Camp Out, which I have my shirt on from 2019. Boom. This is a collector's item. It's light blue. I know none of you can see it, but it's from our 2019 one. We do still have tickets for the conference. If you'd like to come, it's going to be outside. I've reached out to all of the speakers. Hopefully they'll all still be able to come. We have currently lined up Security Sphinx, who we had on the show about a month or two ago. We have Web Jedi. I'm using their Twitter handles because that's how you can get a hold of them. Sundar _K. He's very active here in the Seattle area. We have Daddy Coco Man, Mr. Gray. He's going to be coming and giving a talk. My only worry, I have 5 speakers. We have 1 track, 5 speakers. It's on Saturday evening. My worry is that the sun is not going to be set enough for people to see the projector. So I told the speakers, I was like, look, we're going to start at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. We're going to try to put the projector out so that people can see the slides. But I tried to manage expectations there because we're outside. I'm worried about light pollution, causing issues there. So it may get real rustic. I do see a couple of DEF CON talks that were given on Twitter. I think the mainframe talk from Ian Coldwater and Big Indian Smalls had issues with the projector, so they ended up having to just basically lecture for half an hour. So I'm hoping that will work. I do have a backup, but if you're still interested in coming and seeing some awesome people, just getting out, we don't have any more camping spots, and I'm not going to open up any more camping spots. But if you just want to come out like the day of the 28th, you come out to our campsite, go to infosecampout.com and check us out there. And Patreon, we still have, we have stuff on our Patreon. If you sign up and get a ticket for the conference, we'll send you a code to get a free t-shirt for the conference t-shirts. I think the 2019 t-shirts still on our TPub site. But you can also get things like masks and coffee cups and whatever, and other break-sec swag, and we get a little kickback from that. So speaking of people helping out, thank you to all of our Patreon donors. I'd like to thank Jen C for her donation. She upped her donation from $3 to $5, so I appreciate that. She's been very active in our Slack too, and she's always a great person to talk to in there. We appreciate that. That goes to costs for domain hosting, Zoom accounts, Libsyn hosting as well, and domain, making sure that GoDaddy doesn't, sell our domain to somebody else, because apparently we're kind of a big deal. So, so that goes to that. So appreciate everybody for their support on Patreon. Anything else, Mr. Betcher? Anything before we go?
No.
Are you going to be is B-Sides Austin, B-Sides San Antonio? Is any of that going on this year? Is it virtual?
I have not heard. Heard.
I had not heard anything to the negative either, but I didn't hear anything to the positive either. So, so I didn't know if that was going on this year. I do remember at one time you were one of the volunteers or something for it. I don't know if you relinquished that or not, but yeah, there's still conferences going on. There's still virtual. I think most everything's still going to have a virtual component, at least probably for the next year, until we kick Delta down the road, and whatever Lambda, Epsilon, and whatever the hell the other ones are going to be in the future. But I think there will always be a virtual component. I think that's probably going to be in vogue because people like to go to conferences. And they like to gain that knowledge. So we would do a virtual component at InfoSec Campout. The only problem is there's no internet, unless you tether to your phone, and sitting in a Discord, as I mentioned on previous shows, is just not ideal. So we're not gonna do a virtual thing, but our local meetup, CSEC East, is going to do a virtual thing September 8th. We'll get on our Zoom here, the BreakSec Zoom, and we'll just have something like a free flow of ideas. get on and talk about security stuff. Normally we have a speaker, but I think it's going to be too close to InfoSec Camp Out to have a speaker. So we'll just get on and do some kind of open forum thing, ask questions, do a little lively debate. But you can go to meetup.com and check out CSEC or CSEC East. I'm the organizer of both of them. Weird. And you can check that out. So, all right. Well, that's it for this week. And on Breaking Down Security, hope you have a great week. Stay masked up if you can. Socially distance again. It sounds like January 2020 or March 2020 again, but try to stay socially distant as much as possible. Get your vaccines if you haven't got them, please, because I want to be able to give you an awkward hug like Jay Street does. And the sooner we get out and can get social with people, the better off we are, I think, and will help everybody's mental health. So. And, taking care of yourself is important because you're the only you have. And have a great week and talk to you soon.